It's 4:17 in the morning. It's cold enough that you can see men breathe in the dark. You're in northern France. June 1944. Not on the beaches, not in the big movie version with waves of Higgins boats and machine gun nests. You're inland, hedgerow country, fields chopped up by thick ancient dirt walls, grown over with roots and trees, stone farmhouses, carts, ditches full of muddy water and dead cattle. The kind of ground where you can be 30 yards from another unit and never see them. And in that darkness, in that ugly, close-up terrain, two very different groups of men are both convinced they are about to save the day. And both of them are wrong, because one of them doesn't know the other one exists. And if they find out the normal way, by radio, thousands of men are going to die in the next hour. This is not a story about a big, decisive named battle. This is not D-Day itself. This is not the Bulge. This is not a famous hill. This is a story about confusion, and how confusion, for once, chose mercy. This is the day a broken radio saved thousands of lives. Let's walk in slow. First, the situation. It's days after the landings in Normandy. Allied troops are off the beaches, but not free. Getting inland is slow, brutal work. Every field is its own little war. You have tanks that can't see through hedgerows. You have paratroopers fighting with whatever they landed with. You have German counterattacks hitting small pockets of men who are exhausted, scattered, and sometimes led by guys who haven't slept in 2 days straight. What the Germans want right now, above anything else, is to shove the Allies back into the sea. And to do that, they need to hit fast before the Allies can properly set up artillery, lay supply lines, build airstrips, and start using their numbers. So off to the east, German armor is forming up for a push. That armor is not endless, by the way. People like to talk about German tanks like they grew on trees, but by this point in the war, good armored formations are precious, and they are sent where it matters. And this morning, where it matters is here. The German plan is, hit fast, punch through American lines, cut off 2 airborne units that drop behind the beaches, roll them up before they can link to the main invasion force. If you can do that, you don't throw the Allies back into the water immediately, but you break their spine, you break their momentum, you turn "we're ashore" into "we're isolated." And psychologically, that matters. Now, at the same time, and this is the critical part, the Americans have a plan too. It is, unfortunately, a mirror. There's an American infantry regiment dug in on a series of hedgerows and crossroads that were supposed to be quiet. The map said light resistance. What the map didn't know was how fast the Germans would regroup. So these Americans are basically a soft spot in the line. They think they're holding a basic sector. They're actually sitting in the exact location where the German armored counterattack is about to come crashing through, which on its own would be bad enough. But it gets worse, because behind those American infantrymen, moving up under cover of darkness, boots in the mud, weapons slung, no headlights, is a second American force. Armored, Shermans, half-tracks, anti-tank guns. The works. They've been sent up as local counterattack insurance. That's a thing the U.S. Army was getting very good at by this point in the war. Rapid reinforcement. You hit us, we hit you back before you can even say breakthrough. So the plan is, if the Germans attack, these U.S. reinforcements swing in, smash the Germans in the flank, and stabilize the line. On paper, smart. In reality, this is a live grenade, because here are the details that matter. Detail 1, it is still dark. Visibility is low, and hedgerow country is famous for making everybody feel blind and jumpy. Detail 2, the Americans moving up don't have great local recon. They're being hurried forward with urgency, not with comfort. It's go now, not go slow. Detail 3, communication between the unit already dug in at the hedgerows and the armored unit moving in to reinforce them is garbage. It's not their fault. It's the terrain. It's the chaos of a fast-changing front. It's the fact that paratroopers, line infantry, armor, artillery spotters, and headquarters back on the beach are all talking to each other on different nets with different radio sets, some of which were never meant to talk to each other at all. And this leads us to detail 4. There is supposed to be a radio link. It's supposed to be clean, simple, and life-saving. Basically, hey, we're coming up from the south. Copy, we're at these crossroads. Don't shoot us. Copy, we'll check fire. You do that and everybody is friends. You fail to do that and you get friendly fire on a nightmare scale. And friendly fire in hedgerow country is not like a couple panicked shots across a field. We're talking entire companies lighting up each other at 30 meters because the other guy's helmet silhouette looks wrong in the dark. We're talking tank crews firing canister, shotgun shells the size of a mailbox, down a lane because something moved. We're talking something twitched in that tree line, turning into 40 men on the wrong end of machine gun crossfire before anybody can even shout, "Stop." Now hold that at the front of your mind, because we are about to land on the moment. It's still 4:17. The American reinforcements, those Shermans and half-tracks, are coming in. Their radio link to the infantry up ahead, dead. Not weak, not fuzzy, not spotty, dead. The set that was supposed to be their voice forward just goes to static. And this is not just any old scratchy traffic problem. This is complete failure at the exact worst moment. The officer in the lead Sherman keeps keying the mic, keeps calling the forward position, keeps waiting to hear a call sign back. Nothing. Nothing but hiss. He curses, obviously. He bangs the side of the set because that's what you do. He pulls the headset off and yanks the cable. He has his radio man try to retune, recheck power, check the spare handset. They even pop a fuse, reseat it, slap the side of the hull. Still nothing. And behind him, in the half-tracks, men are adjusting their grips on their rifles because this is how "we're going to go reinforce our guys" can turn into "we're about to drive directly into a German counterattack without warning." Here's the part that seems tiny, but is everything. He wants to keep going. He's under pressure to keep going. He was told to move quickly. He was told that time matters. He was told that the Germans are coming and that he needs to plug the hole now. The instinct, the training even, says, "You lost comms? Fine. Move anyway. They need you. You'll sort it out in contact." That is normal. That is doctrine. That is what most aggressive young commanders do in war. Push. Close the gap. Make contact and overwhelm. Except this guy doesn't. He stops the column. Full stop. Holds in place. In the dark. In the middle of a French lane, where the hedges on both sides look like walls, engine idling, exhaust whispering, men crouch down in the half-tracks thinking, why are we sitting here like targets? He does something in that instant that does not look like courage. He waits. He literally decides, we are not moving another 10 yards until I know who is in front of me. He is not thinking about thousands of lives. That is too big for this moment. He is thinking about, I am not going to shoot my own guys by accident, and I am not going to let them shoot us, and I am not going to roll blind into a German ambush. He is thinking like a man who has actually seen what happens when two units on the same side mistake each other in the dark. He keys the mic again. Static. He tells the driver, hold. He tells the men in the back, stay down, keep quiet. And he waits. Now we switch views. Up ahead, maybe a few hundred meters, maybe less, you've got the American infantry that was already holding the hedgerow line. And they are spooked. They've been told to expect Germans. They've been told German armor is forming up for a thrust. They've been told to hold at all costs. That phrase, hold at all costs, means you are allowed to die here if it slows them down. So they're lying there in the wet dirt, looking out over another hedgerow line, rifles braced. It's dark. It smells like manure and burst vegetation and the weird metallic scent of hot barrel metal cooling in night air. And then someone hears it. Not voices, engines, tracked vehicles. Lots of them. Close. Very close. Coming up a sunken lane that will spit those vehicles out into the open field where the infantry is dug in, within direct line of fire. Imagine what that feels like in your stomach. You hear tanks. You can't see tanks. You know tanks are coming your way, and you've been told German tanks are coming. It's dark. You're tired. Your nerves are strung like piano wire. If you're wrong and you open fire on your own side, you're a murderer. If you're wrong and you don't fire, and they're German, you're all dead in 30 seconds. That's the decision the forward infantry is facing. Now here comes the moment. One squad leader gets eyes on the hedgerow entrance through which those vehicles would appear if they keep rolling. He's got a bazooka team on his left and a .30 caliber machine gun 5 yards away, muzzle already laced into the low opening where he expects silhouettes to break through. He whispers, "Get ready." They're about to ambush what they think is a German armored spearhead. They have surprise. They have position. They are seconds from opening up. Seconds. And this is where the broken radio saves everyone. Because if that arriving American armored column had kept moving, just 10 seconds more, they would have rolled right out into that kill zone. And at that point, the first burst would have opened up. And after that, nothing stops it. The first shot creates noise. Noise creates panic. Panic creates full fire. The machine gun chatters. The bazooka fires. The Shermans return fire with coaxial machine guns and canister. The half-tracks light up with .50 cals. In the dark, under stress, no one can hear anyone yelling, "Stop, stop, friendly, stop," because every gun on both sides is now going cyclic, and that doesn't kill 10 men. That kills hundreds. Very, very fast. And here's the bigger nightmare. German units would absolutely have heard that level of chaos and smashed forward to exploit it. Glorious reinforcement becomes blood-soaked blue on blue becomes total collapse. That's the war math. But that's not what happens. Because back down the lane, the lead American officer, the guy with the dead radio, is still sitting still. He is burning precious minutes. Minutes he was told not to burn. Minutes he will later have to explain. And that pause, that stubborn refusal to move blind, is the only reason those two forces, both American, don't rip each other apart in the next minute. He snaps to his runner, basically the guy who carries messages when radios fail, and says, "You go. On foot. Quiet. Don't get shot. Make contact. Tell them we're friendlies." That runner looks at him like, "You want me to walk into a hedgerow at 4 a.m., with both sides nervous and probably on edge of shooting anything that twitches?" And the answer is yes, exactly that. That is exactly what I want. So this kid, and I say kid because a lot of these message runners were 19, 20, 21 years old tops. This kid climbs down out of the half-track, crouches low, and moves into absolute nightmare country. No light, no white flags. Nothing but whispered curses and boots sinking in mud. He moves slow, hands out, helmet down, heart in his throat. One wrong footstep and he's getting lit up by his own side because they're twitchy and primed, and seconds from unloading on tanks they think are German. He breaks the last hedgerow. He hisses very quietly, "Friendlies, 3rd Battalion, coming up the lane. Friendlies, don't fire. Don't fire." And there is this frozen, twitching pause. The Americans dug in ahead. Do not fire. The Americans bring the barrels of their machine guns off the mouth of that lane. The bazooka team lowers the tube. They do not shoot. They let the runner whisper with the squad leader, confirm the passwords, trade unit names, give positions. Then that runner, who should honestly have a statue somewhere, runs back to the armored column and tells the officer, "They're ours. They're dug in. They almost opened up on us. Do not roll fast into them. They'll panic. Move up slow, on foot, announce first." And that's exactly what they do. They move up careful. They wave. They talk. They identify. They fold into the defensive position without anybody cracking off a nervous first shot. And you know what they set up together seconds later? A very nasty surprise for the German armored force that really is coming down a different approach. And when that German attack hits hard, instead of finding an American unit alone and vulnerable, they run face first into layered infantry and armor with linked fields of fire, anti-tank guns sighted, and the ability to call artillery. That German counterattack does not break through that pocket. Those positions hold. And this is the part most people never hear. The casualty count that morning is ugly because it's war, but it is not catastrophic. It is not slaughter. It is not the line is gone. Hundreds of men who would have died in a friendly fire disaster on top of an enemy breakthrough. Don't. And the reason is stupid and tiny and glorious. A radio failed. A radio that was supposed to be the link between those two American forces just didn't work. So instead of charging in blind, which would have triggered panic fire, the lead officer stopped. Instead of assuming, well, that must be the Germans, the dug-in infantry paused before pulling triggers. Instead of saying, we don't have time, a commander made time. That combination in that exact minute is what saved them. Now, let's zoom out. Why is this a hinge moment and not just a neat little anecdote? Because this wasn't just a lucky accident. This was a live example of one of the ugliest truths of combat. Your tech will betray you, your plan will go sideways, and when that happens, the only safety you have left is judgment, which sounds poetic. It's not, it's practical. The U.S. Army lived and died on coordination. Infantry, armor, artillery, air. That's the machine. And in Normandy, in those tight lanes and hedgerows, that machine was being tested for the first time in this exact terrain. This near disaster taught them, fast, that you could not assume comms. You had to confirm identity visually. You had to move disciplined. You had to build in time to not shoot your own people. Because the Germans didn't always have to kill you. They could just make you kill each other. And that morning, that almost happened. It's important to understand the human side, too. That American infantry unit dug in ahead. They were seconds away from opening fire on their own reinforcements. If they had, you're not just looking at a bad morning. You're looking at trauma that never leaves. Imagine living with that. Imagine walking away from that field, knowing you just killed a dozen guys from your own division. You don't shake that off. Not in a week, not in a year, not in 40 years. The officer in the Sherman, if he'd pushed forward like doctrine told him to, if he'd rolled up blind, if the first gunner up ahead had panicked and squeezed, we would be telling a completely different story right now. Instead of a broken radio saved thousands, we'd be saying, a broken radio lit Americans up in the dark and cracked a hole wide enough for a German armored division to pour through. That's not dramatic storytelling. That's what almost happened. So pause here, because this is the part in the movie where you'd expect the narrator to say, against all odds, a single malfunction prevented a tragedy. That's not actually the lesson. The lesson is uglier and smarter. The lesson is this. It wasn't the malfunction, it was the refusal to panic. The radio died. That's just physics. But the choice not to assume, the choice not to squeeze first, the choice to physically send a runner into the dark, unannounced, unprotected, to go sort something out that should have been sorted by tech, that's leadership. That's discipline. That, more than tanks or ranks or maps, is what saved those men. Now, that moment becomes very quietly part of doctrine. After this, units coming off the beach learn fast. If you don't have positive ID, if you don't have confirmed comms, you slow down. You physically link up. You pass passwords. You do not spray into the dark and hope. Why? Because the Germans you're fighting aren't stupid. They're listening. They'll use any chaos you hand them. That morning, they didn't get it. And here's something else that never makes the highlight reel. The runner. The kid who walked into a possible crossfire to deliver a message that a radio didn't. He doesn't get a headline. He doesn't get a medal the public hears about. He doesn't get a statue. But what he did, quietly, preserved an American foothold in Normandy just long enough for the rest of the machine to catch up, for artillery to roll off landing craft, for engineers to clear more roads, for fuel to start moving inland, for airfields to be laid down, for P-47 Thunderbolts, those fighter bombers the Germans learned to fear, to start flying from French soil instead of England. That morning he saved bodies. Later, whether he knows it or not, he saved time. And in Normandy, time is blood. By 1 hour today, and that hour turns into a line on a map tomorrow, and that line on a map becomes, the Allies are no longer at the beach. The Allies are in the country. The Allies are digging in. That is how you lose Germany. You don't lose Germany just because tanks land. You lose Germany when the landing force survives the first counterpunch. And one of the counterpunches, the German push that morning, missed its chance to crack the line because the line didn't crack itself. So, let's lay it out clean. A German armored thrust is forming. American infantry are dug in forward. braced for impact. American armor is rushing up blind to reinforce them. The radio link that's supposed to prevent friendly fire is dead. The lead American officer should push. He doesn't. He waits. He risks looking slow and hesitant in a war that rewards aggression. He risks getting chewed out. He risks, honestly, court-martial level anger if his commander's having a bad day. But he also risks not shooting his own people. So he waits. He sends one man on foot to do the job a radio should have done. That runner, with no spotlight and no music and no guarantee of getting back, physically prevents one side from opening fire on the other in the dark. The two American forces link up safely. When the German attack actually comes, it slams into a coordinated defense instead of a panicked mess. The defense holds. The line survives. Thousands of men who absolutely could have died in the most pointless way imaginable do not. All because at 4:17 in the dark, a piece of equipment failed and a human being refused to act like a machine. Now I want to leave you with the pause before the sun comes up, because this entire moment happens fast. It's minutes. It's not some hour-long council. There's no map table. There's no general with a pipe slapping his hand on Europe and saying, "Well, gentlemen, it's one hedge, one dirt lane, one stalled column, one dead radio, one officer saying, 'No, we hold.' One kid walking forward whispering, 'Friendlies, friendlies, friendlies,' to men with their fingers already on triggers. And just like that, thousands of men live to see daylight. And daylight in Normandy is everything, because daylight means air cover. Daylight means you can see the guys 50 yards away and know what helmet they're wearing. Daylight means the chaos held long enough for order to take root. That is where we are right now, in the last black edge of night, in between disaster and daylight, with two American forces staring at each other through branches and nerves and not shooting. And in our next part, we're going to follow what that bought. We're going to go into what the Germans expected to roll over, what they actually ran into, what it cost them when they hit a unified wall instead of a self-inflicted massacre, and how this nothing-on-the-map moment, this quiet, unglamorous, unfilmed, almost forgotten hesitation, ended up echoing way past one hedgerow. Because sometimes history isn't the bold attack that changed the war. Sometimes it's the attack that didn't happen. And this is one of those times, and this is one of those times. Let's pick up exactly where we left off. It's minutes later. The two American units have linked up without killing each other in the dark. The runner has given the passwords. The barrels have dipped. The first shot, the shot that would have opened the gates of hell, never happened. The sun is still not up, but the sky is starting to bruise from black to that pre-dawn gray blue, where you can just barely tell a tree from a person. And in that in-between light, the Germans finally arrive. Now, to understand what happens next, you have to know what they thought they were driving into. From the German point of view, this is supposed to be clean. Their intel says, American paratroopers are still scattered. American infantry is thin, not dug in. Armor support hasn't had time to get off the beaches and push inland in strength yet. The window to push them back, or at least carve them up, isolate them, cause panic, is right now. So the plan is simple: hit hard, punch through one weak segment, split the Americans into pockets, destroy those pockets before they can link. That is doctrine. That is textbook. That is how you break an invasion before it becomes an occupation. And their mindset is, we're racing the clock. Because once the Americans really dig in and bring up artillery and air power, it's over. We'll be the ones getting pounded. So this is their shot. They form up in the early light. Infantry carriers, armor, supported by mortars and machine guns. And they move. This is not some lumbering, lost group of stragglers. This is a coordinated, angry, experienced attack force. They expect to hit one tired American infantry regiment. They expect that regiment to break. That's what they've seen before. That's what they saw in 1940. That's what everybody in German command still wants to believe. When we hit hard, they fold. What they drive into instead is nothing like what they think is there. Because instead of one tired regiment by itself, they run into an American position that, thanks to that radio failure, is now layered. You've got infantry dug in behind hedgerows. You've got machine gun teams who already had lanes of fire prepped in the gaps. You've got bazooka teams told exactly where tanks will try to nose through. You've got Shermans pulled up in hull-down spots, barely showing anything but turrets over the hedgerow, guns already laid. And behind them, you've got radios that actually work, not the one that failed, but other sets, now talking back to artillery units in range. So instead of chaos, what the Germans actually walk into is a mouth, a killing mouth, a position that is awake, coordinated, steady, and absolutely ready to shoot back. And remember, that position exists in that form only because those two American forces did not shoot each other in panic 5 minutes earlier. That is what the broken radio bought, not just lives, time. And time in war becomes structure. Structure becomes kill zones. Kill zones stop breakthroughs. So picture this from the German side. You're riding in an armored half-track. You can smell oil and exhaust in canvas. Your boots are vibrating against steel. The hedgerow ahead of you is blowing out occasional little puffs of dust. Not from gunfire yet, just from the movement of your own vehicles. Your officers yelling above engine noise, giving hand signs, pointing, telling you you're going to roll straight through the first American line and keep moving. Aggression, aggression, aggression. And then it happens. Before you even fully clear the hedgerow, the first American machine guns open, not blind, not panicked, deliberate. They're raking the lane you're in from an angle, turning that little dirt road into a meat grinder. Your driver stomps the brake, hard. Men in the back are thrown forward. Someone cracks their head on the mount. You smell sudden cordite, that sharp gunpowder smell. And you realize in the space of 2 seconds, we aren't surprising anybody. They're waiting for us. Then a Sherman fires, not high explosive at long range like tank duels in the movies. Point blank, straight down the gap, straight into the nose of the lead German vehicle. At that kind of distance, a tank gun doesn't sound like a boom. It sounds like the air itself just punched. And the front vehicle in the German column stops being a vehicle. It becomes scrap and flame and shrapnel and screaming. And behind it, traffic jam. The rest of that German push slams to a halt and a choke point. That is exactly what the Americans needed. If that lead American officer in the Sherman had charged ahead blind, like doctrine said, like urgency said, and blundered into his own infantry, there would be no organized kill zone here. The Germans would be rolling into confusion, not a wall. But instead, they've rolled into a wall, and the wall shoots back. German infantry starts to spill out and take cover, returning fire, trying to fan out into the hedgerows. And this is where hedgerow country turns a mean for them, because hedgerows work both ways. They hide you, yes, but they also trap you. If someone's already sighted those gaps in lanes and you walk into them, you're walking into guns you can't see until they're chewing through you. You're not maneuvering in open desert. You're in a maze where every opening is already covered. The Germans throw smoke. They try to flank. Mortars start dropping. American mortar crews answer back. American machine gunners are disciplined, firing short, controlled bursts, keeping barrels cool, not going wild. American bazooka teams do what they were trained to do and what nobody gives them enough credit for. They don't waste shots. They don't fire at armor blindly. They wait until a German vehicle nosing around a hedgerow shows side armor, where it's weaker, and then they hit it. Boom, immobilized, blocked lane. Add that to the traffic jam, and every vehicle that burns in that choke point becomes cover the next one can't drive through. The German attack, which was supposed to be violent and fast and penetrating, bogs down. And once it bogs down, once it loses speed and surprise, it loses its teeth, because now something else arrives. American artillery. This is the other piece of the machine that the Germans were desperate to beat. American artillery in World War II was not glamorous. It wasn't a Tiger tank. It wasn't a big red arrow on the map moment. It was math, discipline, logistics, and absolute reliability. If an American infantry unit could get on the radio and shout a grid, within minutes, steel was coming down. And that is exactly what happens now. The unified American position calls in fire. Mark this hedgerow. Mark this road. Mark this wood line where they're forming up. Within minutes, incoming. If you've never felt artillery as a human being, which is good, keep it that way, it's not just an explosion. It's a pressure. It's a slam in your chest, in your teeth. The ground kicks like it's alive. German infantry, already pinned in a hedgerow maze, right behind burning half-tracks and crippled armor, now starts getting walked by artillery. Mortars above, shells in front, machine guns from the side. Bazooka shots slamming into anything that tries to muscle through. That is not a breakthrough. That is a meat grinder in reverse. And here's the result. That big, fast, we're going to punch you off your positions and split your line attack? It stalls. And then critically, it pulls back. Not because they've run out of will, not because they're cowards, because they've done the math in real time. Pushing further into that kill zone means losing the rest of that formation. Losing the rest of that formation means losing the ability to try again today or tomorrow. And if you can't try again today or tomorrow, that window you were racing to beat, the window where the Allies are still fragile, that window just closed. In plain terms, the Germans just lost their shot. Now pause again, because on paper you can summarize all of this in one sentence. A German armored counterattack was repulsed by a well-positioned American infantry and armor force with effective artillery support. Okay, good job, historian. But that's not what happened. What happened was that well-positioned American force should not have existed. Those infantry and those tanks were seconds away from killing each other. And if they had, that German counterattack would have hit tired, isolated survivors and still shaking and bleeding from friendly fire, and probably trying to pull their dead out of burning half-tracks. That's not a wall. That's a wound. You don't hold with a wound. If that had happened, the German armor keeps going. They surge through. They cut the road. They isolate not just one unit, but everybody behind it. And now you're not talking local setback. You're talking hole in the Allied line during the most sensitive days of the Normandy campaign. You're talking panic call to higher command saying they're through, when the truth is nobody even knows who shot who in the dark. And now you've got rumors outrunning facts. And rumors kill, by the way. They kill morale. They kill tempo. They make cautious generals stop advances they should be pushing. Instead, none of that happens. Instead, the report up the chain sounds like this. Enemy armor attacked. We held. Casualties heavy but acceptable. Line intact. Artillery effective. That's boring. That's beautiful. Because boring and intact becomes we keep the beachhead. And we keep the beachhead becomes we build up men and fuel and guns faster than you can knock us back. And that becomes we're not leaving. That's how you lose a continent if you're Germany in 1944. Not in one dramatic instant, in the slow horror of realizing they're still here, they're still linked, they're still coordinated. We hit them and they didn't break. Now I want you to think about something kind of cruel. That German formation that got chewed up? They didn't know a friendly fire disaster almost happened. Nobody sent them a note that said, hey, just so you're aware, if you'd attacked 5 minutes earlier, you could have driven straight through 2. American units blasting each other to pieces. They don't know that. All they know is they hit hard. And somehow, these Americans were dug in, ready, coordinated, with tanks, with anti-armor, and with artillery before dawn. And you know what that does? It changes the way you think about your enemy. German officers had lived off this myth for years. American troops are soft. They panic. They don't stand in a hard fight. This morning said, not anymore. You don't get to believe your own myth after you run into that. And that shock, that shatter in confidence, also matters. Because yes, the German military kept fighting. They fought savagely. They fought all the way to the German border and beyond. But the aura of invincibility, the aura of we always smash through if we arrive on time, took hits like this all across Normandy. They were building a story about themselves. Normandy started tearing it up. And here comes the microscopic part of the story that almost nobody talks about. But I love it. After the fight, after daylight, after the smoke, after the German push falls back, and the American lines re-solidify and stretch and breathe, after the artillery stops walking shells down hedgerows, after the runners are no longer sprinting messages under fire, after the medics are hauling the wounded to the aid stations that now smell like blood and morphine and diesel, there is a conversation. It's not a big, dramatic, for history books conversation. It's small. It happens next to a knocked-out German half-track that's still popping a little from heat. The officer in the Sherman, the one who refused to push blind without comms, is talking to the infantry lieutenant from the forward line. They're both filthy. They're both wired on adrenaline and exhaustion. Their ears are still ringing. And the infantry lieutenant, who was 2 seconds away from ordering his men to fire on what he thought was a German armored spearhead, asked something like, "Why'd you stop?" Think about that. He's not saying, "Good job." He's not saying, "Thank you for saving us." He's actually asking, "Why didn't you just keep coming? Why didn't you roll up like you'd been told? Why didn't you do the normal aggressive thing?" And what he's really asking is, "Do you understand how close we were to killing you?" And the armored officer, tired, muddy, annoyed, still high on, almost dying, says something simple, something like, "Radio was dead. I wasn't going to roll into a position I hadn't confirmed. That's it. Not dramatic, not poetic, just, if I don't know, I don't move." Now pause on that, because that's the doctrine that quietly spreads after this. If I don't know, I don't move. In normal life, that sounds obvious. In combat, in 1944, in Normandy, under pressure, with headquarters yelling, "Hurry, hurry, hurry," they're breaking through, that sounds like heresy. Because war, especially German war up to that point, worship speed, smash forward, exploit confusion. Don't give the enemy time to stabilize. What that officer did was the opposite. He refused to create extra confusion. He refused to hand chaos-free kills. And honestly, that's evolution. That's a professional army getting smarter in real time. Because up until then, especially early in the war, a lot of units still believed in the myth of momentum. If you're not pushing, you're losing. If you're not advancing, you're failing. But that's not always true. Sometimes not pushing is the win. Sometimes holding for 2 extra minutes in the dark, making sure you're not walking into the mouth of your own side's guns, is how you keep a whole sector alive. That got written down later, not as poetry, as policy. Check positive ID, confirm position. Deconflict fires. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. Fast is alive. They taught that because of mornings like this one. Now let's talk about the men you don't see. The runner, the kid who crept forward whispering passwords instead of firing bullets. He probably never told that story later, not the way it deserves. Because how do you tell it? I walked into 2 nervous, half-panicked, heavily armed groups in the dark and convinced them not to kill each other. That sounds like bragging. Guys who survive don't like sounding like they're bragging. But here's the truth. That kid's footsteps are written into the map of Western Europe. Seriously, because the Allies did not get kicked off Normandy. They did not get split. They did not get forced back to the water. They held. They dug in. They built airfields. They brought in fuel, trucks, engineers, medics, food, ammunition, replacements, radios that actually worked. From that beachhead came the breakout. From that breakout came the drive across France. From that drive came the collapse of German positions in the West. From that collapse came the end. Now sure, you can say, come on, be serious. That all would have happened anyway, would it? Are you sure? Because history is full of moments where something would have happened anyway, until one morning in the dark, somebody shot the wrong person, the wrong unit broke, the wrong rumor spread, and a victory turned into a delay, and a delay turned into a stalemate, and a stalemate turned into a negotiation, and a negotiation turned into, we didn't finish the job. Normandy wasn't guaranteed. We talk about it like it was inevitable, like D-Day happens, Allies land, and boom, straight line to Berlin. It wasn't a straight line. It was a million tiny cliffs that had to be climbed in the dark by men who couldn't even see each other's faces under their helmets. This no-name hedgerow, this lane, this one broken radio, was one of those cliffs. And here's where we end. Because this story doesn't end with a medal ceremony. It doesn't end with a general saying, "You saved thousands." It ends with something way quieter. The shooting stops. The sun finally burns through the gray and lays this harsh, flat, unforgiving daylight across the hedgerows and wrecked metal and torn earth. Medics move through, fast but gentle. Artillery crews who've been awake forever slump down on ammo crates. Infantrymen, who were seconds from killing friendly armor, are now sharing cigarettes with those tank crews and saying things like, "You almost got it," and laughing the kind of laugh you only laugh when you're shaking and pretending not to. The armored officer who held the column puts his headset down and rubs his eyes with his knuckles. The runner sits on the step of a half-track with his helmet dangling between his knees, and he can't stop replaying in his head what it felt like to whisper friendlies through clenched teeth to a machine gun team that already had the gun shouldered. Over in the field, there are bodies under ponchos, some German, some American, but there are not rows and rows and rows of Americans cut down by their own side. There's not that, and that absence, that silence where screaming could have been, is the victory. Because the German attack that was supposed to rip the line apart, it failed. Because the American position that was supposed to be blind and isolated, it wasn't. Because the panic that was supposed to explode, it didn't. Because a radio that was supposed to work, didn't. And because a human being said, "We wait." This is the part of war that doesn't get songs. Nobody carves discipline at 417 in a hedgerow into a monument. But it should be there. Because some parts of World War II turned on tanks, on fleets, on factories, on code breaking, on brilliant plans. And some parts turned on a guy in the dark, choosing not to pull the trigger first. That morning in Normandy, "Don't shoot yet" saved thousands of lives. It saved a foothold. It kept a beachhead alive long enough to turn into a bridgehead, and a bridgehead into a breakout, and a breakout into a road to Berlin. It kept the war on track. So when you hear people talk about the cost of freedom, don't just picture the charge. Picture the pause. Picture a stalled column in a French lane. Picture an officer whispering, "Hold." Picture a 20-year-old kid walking into black hedgerows with both sides ready to kill anything that moves. Picture the shot that never happened. Because sometimes the moment that saves the world is the one where nobody fires.